Hello and welcome. I'm going to discuss Egypt's geopolitical strategy and the instability in the Horn of Africa. As you know, the Horn of Africa is a region already grappling with conflict, climate change, and political upheaval, which is now the epicenter of a dangerous political struggle. At its heart lies the world's longest river, the Nile, and the future of its waters. For decades, Egypt has considered the Nile its birthright, essential for its very survival. But now, a massive hydroelectric project upstream threatens to fundamentally shape the balance of power, forcing Egypt to adopt a more assertive and some would argue destabilizing foreign policy. We are talking about the rivalry between Egypt and Ethiopia, primarily driven by the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam or GERD. This isn't just a dispute over water, it is a conflict over regional dominance, and Cairo's strategy to counter Addis Ababa is creating serious instability across the Horn. What are the key drivers? The GERD, built by Ethiopia on the Blue Nile, is Africa's largest dam. For Ethiopia, it is an existential project, a source of vital electricity for millions and a source of national development. For Egypt, which relies on the Nile for over 90% of its fresh water, the GERD is an existential threat. Egypt fears the dam's operation, particularly during drought periods, could drastically reduce downstream flow, imperiling its agricultural sectors and economy. Since diplomacy has repeatedly stalled, Egypt has moved beyond the negotiating table. Geopolitical policy now centers on encircling and pressuring Ethiopia by building strategic alliances with its neighbors, effectively turning the existing regional disputes into proxy points in the Nile conflict. This policy has three immediate destabilizing impacts. Instability point one is the Somalia alliance. The most visible sign of Egypt's new strategy is deepening security ties with Somalia. Somalia is currently locked in its own escalating disputes with Ethiopia after Ethiopia signed a controversial maritime deal with the breakaway region of Somaliland. Egypt quickly capitalized on this tension. Cairo has increased army supply and diplomatic support to Mogadishu. Crucially, Egypt has expressed readiness to deploy troops as a part of the African Union peacekeeping mission in Somalia, a presence Ethiopia has historically maintained. This move serves a dual purpose for Egypt. The first purpose is projecting force. It establishes an Egyptian military presence close to Ethiopia's southern border. The second purpose is counterbalancing Ethiopia. It directly challenges Ethiopia's long-standing security in Somalia, effectively forcing Ethiopia to look both north and south. By inserting itself into the Ethiopia-Somalia rivalry, Egypt risks militarizing a delicate situation, potentially transforming an existing diplomatic crisis into a dangerous proxy arena. Instability, too, is alignment with Eritrea. On Ethiopia's northern flank, Egypt has historically maintained close relations with Eritrea, one of Ethiopia's primary regional rivers. This element has amplified recently as Ethiopia, a landlocked nation, has strongly pushed for access to the Red Sea, an objective Eritrea views as a threat to its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Egypt uses its relationship with Eritrea to further excuse Ethiopia by affirming a strong support for Eritrea's sovereignty and boosting economic and security cooperation. Cairo is solidifying an anti-Ethiopian coalition along the entire Red Sea corridor. This strategic alignment exacerbates the already tense relationship between Addis Ababa and Asmara, heightening the risk of renewed conflict, especially when coupled with Ethiopia's assertive pursuit of sea access. Instability point three is instability point three is intervention in Sudan's civil war. The instability in Sudan, ravaged by civil war, is also directly impacted by the Egypt-Ethiopia rivalry. Sudan is a third Nile riparian state, and its domestic turmoil provides a vacuum for external powers. Egypt's policy, which has historically been to support the Sudanese Armed Force (SAF), is driven not just by border security, but by the desire to secure a supportive voice in the Gordon negotiation. A stable, aligned Sudan is vital for Egypt's water security interests. However, this intervention turns Sudan's brutal internal conflict into a venue for regional power projection. As Egypt supports one side, the war becomes further entangled with regional competition, prolonging the suffering and ensuring that the conflict's outcome remains tied to guard dispute rather than a purely domestic peace process. Okay, so what is my conclusion and outlook is Egypt's geopolitical policy in the Horn, driven by the singular imperative of securing its share of the Nile water, is increasingly characterized by defensive assertiveness. By forcing alliances with Ethiopia's rivals, projecting military influences, and wading into internal conflicts, Cairo is attempting to create a geopolitical excuse that force Addis Ababa back to negotiating table on Egypt's turf. But this strategy comes at a heavy cost. It elevates localized tension into regional flashpoints, risks direct military confrontations, and ensures that the instability in the Horn of Africa remains tied to the historical rivalry of the Nile Basin's two giants. Without a comprehensive, mutually beneficial water sharing agreement, the competition for Nile will continue to be the primary engine driving instability and the threat of large scale conflict in one of the world's most fragile regions. The Ethiopians, please share, copy link, like this video